Eala dazzles in DC. The Filipina star shows exactly why she's a superstar in the making. Such heart, such desire and quality. From a set down against the former world.
There is a moment in every great rivalry when the script finally gets rewritten. When the player who was supposed to lose doesn't. When everything the numbers predicted, everything history suggested, everything the crowd quietly feared, collapses in a single unforgettable afternoon. Washington, D.C. Summer 2026. A tennis court baking under August heat. And a 21-year-old from the Philippines standing on the other side of the net from an Olympic gold medalist. Nobody outside the Philippines truly believed what was about to happen. Most of the world wasn't even watching. They should have been. To understand what unfolded on that court in Washington, you have to go back 3 years. Back to a different tournament, a different continent, and a very different ending. The 2023 Asian Games in Hangzhou. A semi-final that would leave a mark. Zheng composed, powerful, relentless dismantled a younger, less experienced Alex Eala in 3 sets. 6-1. 7-5 in the second. 6-3 to close it out. Clinical. Almost surgical. Eala walked away with bronze. Zheng walked away with momentum that would carry her all the way to Olympic gold in Paris the following year. For Filipino tennis fans, it was a painful afternoon. Not because losing hurts, losing always hurts, but because of what it seemed to confirm. That the gap between their rising star and the very best in the world was still real. Still significant. Still wide enough to matter. Zheng would go on to reach the final of the 2024 Australian Open. She would stand on the podium in Paris with a gold medal around her neck. She would climb to world number 4 among the most feared players in women's tennis. And Alex Eala? She kept working. Quietly. Persistently. With the kind of patience that doesn't make headlines but eventually changes everything. By the time the 2026 season arrived, both players were at very different points in their journeys, but perhaps not in the ways you might expect. Zheng's road back had been brutal. Persistent pain in her right elbow had forced her under the surgeon's knife. Months away from competition. The entire 2026 Australian Open missed. Ranking points evaporating. A player who had stood at number 4 in the world watching her position slip to 123 while she worked through rehabilitation, one careful session at a time. There is nothing glamorous about a comeback in professional tennis. The tour doesn't wait. The ranking system doesn't offer sympathy. Every week away costs something that takes months to rebuild. But Zheng had returned. First-round exits at Roland Garros and Wimbledon stung. They always do for a player of her caliber. Yet the week before Washington, she had reached the quarterfinals in Athens. A quiet signal to those paying attention. The champion was still in there. Not fully restored but returning. Meanwhile, Eala had been doing something remarkable. At Wimbledon 2026, she became the first Filipino player in history to reach the round of 16 in a Grand Slam singles event. Along the way, she defeated a former world number 1 on grass, a result that sent shockwaves through the tennis world and introduced millions of new viewers to a name they would not soon forget. Alex Eala. World number 28. 21 years old. And suddenly, undeniably, the most exciting young player in women's tennis. The draw in Washington brought them together again. 3 years after Hangzhou. Same players. Different moment. Different versions of themselves. Most analysts still leaned toward Zheng, despite the rankings gap. And that instinct wasn't unreasonable. Ranking fluctuations tell part of the story, they never tell all of it. A reigning Olympic champion who had recently competed at the quarterfinal level didn't need a high ranking to be dangerous. She needed only a good day. And for one set, it looked very much like she was going to get one. Zheng came out with purpose. The power that had made her one of the tour's most feared servers was still very much present. Her baseline game found its groove. She absorbed Eala's opening pressure without flinching, then gradually shifted the dynamic in her favor, closing out the first set 6-4 on the back of 3 consecutive games that silenced whatever early optimism had been building among Filipino supporters watching from thousands of miles away. For a moment, it felt familiar. Too familiar. The same opening chapter. The same early dominance. The same creeping anxiety that history might simply repeat itself on a different court, in a different city, in a different year. But something had changed. And it wasn't visible in the score. Not yet. Alex Eala didn't panic. That might sound simple. But for a 21-year-old facing a reigning Olympic champion, after dropping the first set on the biggest stage of her young career, staying composed is anything but simple. It is, in fact, the hardest thing in professional tennis. She reset. Mentally, tactically, emotionally. She sharpened her return game. She started applying pressure on Zheng's serve in a way she hadn't managed in the opening set. And when she fell into 0-40 situations, moments where any lapse in concentration could have handed Zheng the match, she found something extraordinary. She found calm. Clutch tennis. The kind that experienced players spend entire careers trying to manufacture under pressure. Eala played it as if it came naturally. The second set became a war of momentum. A battle of holds and breaks, each game feeling heavier than the last. Eala fell behind 3-4. A lesser player might have wavered. She didn't. She broke back immediately. Held for 5-4. Then served out the set at 6-4. One set all. A deciding third. And that is when the match transformed into something else entirely. From the very first game of that final set, something was different. Eala stepped onto the court looking nothing like the player who had dropped the opening set. She held to love. Immediate control. Immediate intent. A statement delivered without a single wasted point. Then she broke Zheng's serve. Then she broke it again. Then again. And again. 4 consecutive breaks. A 4-love lead that materialized so quickly it seemed almost impossible. The Olympic champion, the player who had defeated Eala 3 years earlier, who had stood on the highest step of the podium in Paris, who had been winning matches at the top level of this sport for the better part of a decade, began to look shaken. Her body language shifted. The composure that had defined the first set gave way to something unfamiliar. Frustration. Disbelief. The unforced errors came. The rallies shortened. And Eala, calm, precise, utterly in control, dictated every single exchange. By the time the final point landed, Eala had closed out the deciding set 6-1. Final score, 4-6, 6-4, 6-1. Numbers tell part of the story. They never capture all of it. Yes, Eala entered ranked 28. Yes, Zheng had dropped to 123 following months of injury recovery. On paper, the result might look predictable to someone who doesn't understand tennis. But anyone who does understand this sport knows exactly what Qinwen Zheng represents even now, even at 123. A Grand Slam finalist. An Olympic gold medalist. A player who had spent years defeating some of the biggest names on the biggest stages women's tennis has to offer. A player who, just 7 days earlier, had been competing at the quarter-final level. She is not a faded star. She is a returning champion still finding her footing. And Alex Eala beat her. Convincingly. In a manner that left no room for doubt. For the Philippines, this was more than a tennis result. In a country where basketball fills every outdoor court and boxing champions are celebrated like national heroes, tennis has always been a sport watched from a distance. Admired in others. Not quite claimed as their own. Alex Eala is changing that. Every milestone she reaches arrives as a first. First Filipino to reach a Grand Slam round of 16. First Filipino to defeat a former world number 1. First Filipino to defeat a reigning Olympic champion. Each record is not just a personal achievement. It is a door opened for every young player in Manila, in Cebu, in Davao, in every community where a child has held a racket and wondered whether the dream was even worth dreaming. Now they have an answer. One of their own is standing across the net from Olympic champions and walking away with a win. The significance of 2 Asian players competing on the stage of a WTA 500 event and attracting the level of international attention this match generated cannot be understated. Commentators across the tennis world have spent years discussing the emergence of Asia as a genuine force in women's tennis. This match was not simply evidence of that emergence. It was a declaration. A generation of players from across the continent is arriving with world-class skill, mental toughness, and the belief that the very top of this sport belongs to them as much as it belongs to anyone. Eala and Zheng, in many ways, represent 2 sides of that same movement. One at the peak of her powers, navigating a complicated return from injury. The other ascending with a confidence that grows more dangerous with every match she plays. What sets Eala apart, what has made the 2026 season so compelling to watch, is not simply that she is winning. It is the way she is winning. After losing that first set in Washington, a younger or less mature player might have rushed. Tried to force the match back quickly. Played into Zheng's hands. Instead, she did the opposite. She slowed down. She made adjustments. She trusted the work she had put in. That level of tactical intelligence and emotional regulation is rare at 21. Genuinely rare. It suggests that the ceiling on Alex Eala's game remains, for now, impossible to see. Her Wimbledon campaign showed she could succeed on grass. Washington showed she could transfer that success to hard courts. Against different opponents, under different kinds of pressure, on different surfaces, she has answered every question the tennis world has put to her. And there will be more questions. There always are. As the hardcourt season builds toward its peak and the US Open draws closer, the conversation around Eala has shifted. Not dramatically. Not overnight. But unmistakably. She is no longer a talented prospect worth monitoring. She is a contender. A player who, on any given day, can defeat anyone in the draw. A player whose ranking currently sitting at 28 many analysts believe could break into the top 20 before this season ends. For Zheng, the road ahead is its own kind of story. The talent is undeniable. The pedigree is real. Her best tennis may well still be ahead of her, waiting on the other side of full fitness and restored confidence. She has climbed this mountain before. She knows the way. But for this afternoon in Washington, in this particular chapter of this particular rivalry, the story belonged to someone else. 3 years ago, in Hangzhou, Zheng handed Alex Eala a defeat that stung. Not because it ended a tournament run, but because of what it seemed to say about the distance between them. About the gap that still existed. About the time it would take to close it. 3 years of training. 3 years of competing. 3 years of quiet, relentless improvement. And then in a city far from home, in the heat of an American summer, in the deciding set of a match the world hadn't fully expected her to win, Alex Eala closed that gap completely. She didn't just win a tennis match. She settled unfinished business. She turned the memory of a painful defeat into the fuel for one of the most defining performances of her young career. And in doing so, she gave a nation of fans something far more valuable than a victory. She gave them proof. Proof that the long road is worth traveling. That the quiet years of work eventually produce something extraordinary. That one unforgettable afternoon can rewrite everything that came before it. The rest of the WTA Tour has been put on notice. And somewhere in the Philippines, a child is picking up a tennis racket for the first time. Wondering if maybe just maybe they could do something like that too. The story is nowhere near finished. It is only just beginning.